Hello everyone and welcome. In today's video I'm going to show you how to address a P1519 IAC circuit failure code on a 7th generation Honda Civic. Now what I'm going to show you in this video is likely going to apply to a lot of other Honda models, so stay tuned and follow along. So this is what the problem I'm experiencing when I have a P1519 code. You notice that it starts, the check engine light is on, and the idle, even though it's minus 10 degrees centigrade here, that the idle is about, well, 700 to 800 RPM, when it really should be around 1400 at this temperature. Okay, so just to confirm our engine code issue, we're going to have to locate the diagnostic connector and read the engine codes with our trusty scan tool here. Now on this particular Civic, the diagnostic connector is located right by the driver's side foot pedal for the gas, which is right here. And then you see way back there's this gray connector. And we just plug our scan tool in and then pull the codes from the vehicle. We're going to turn the ignition to run and then hit the link button on our tool. And it confirms that we have a P1519 IAC circuit failure. Now some of the tools that we're going to need to complete this job successfully are a set of needle nose pliers so that we can undo the coolant hose clamps, a flat bladed screwdriver to help us remove those coolant hoses from the IAC valve, a 3/8 drive ratchet, a Phillips number 2 screwdriver to help undo those screws once we've loosened them off, a can of throttle clean to clean the replacement IAC valve if you're buying a used one like I did, a 1/4 drive ratchet here with both a 10mm and 8mm socket, a Phillips number 2 socket bit, and this is really important because you don't want to strip the screws that are holding the IAC valve onto the motor. They're really tight and you're not going to be able to undo them by hand using a normal screwdriver. You have to have a number 2 Phillips socket that goes on the end of a ratchet. And then we have to have a replacement IAC valve. These things are normally $350 at the Canadian Honda dealership, so I decided to go to an auto wrecker and just get a used one. And by the way, they were just a few bucks at the junkyard. And then a replacement IAC 2 throttle body mating gasket, which costs about $5 at your local Honda dealership. So we'll start off by undoing the top of our air cleaner housing. Okay, so I've undone the 7 screws off the air cleaner cover. You can see it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we're just gonna lift this cover off. With the top cover removed, let's go ahead and remove the 2 10mm acorn nuts that are holding the throttle and cruise control cable to the top of the valve cover. And then just lift the cable assembly off of the valve cover, which will then give us a little more clearance to get to the lower air cleaner housing mounting bolts, which is 1, 2, 3. Now, once we remove the 3 mounting bolts on the housing, we can't actually remove this lower housing just yet because there's actually a hidden clamp underneath this housing that is holding this rubber grommet piece that's part of the air cleaner housing to the throttle body. And you gotta kind of feel around underneath it. But you can actually see that there's this clamp here with a Phillips head or a 8mm socket that can actually get it out, if you guys can see it right there. So I'm just going to stick my ratchet on the end and then just loosen that clamp. Now the final step before we actually pull the air cleaner housing off of the engine is to also squeeze our little hose clamp here and then just use a screwdriver or a pair of pliers just to break the seal of this breather hose off of the valve cover. Now when I lifted the air filter housing out, I found that it was easier just to lift up from the right hand side and then pull it out this way, because this tab on the far left actually has to go underneath the intake air muffler. Now you'll also notice that this rubber grommet ring didn't actually want to come off of the air cleaner housing. And that's fine. We will pull that off and reattach that afterward. Alright guys, so once we've removed the air cleaner, the little IAC valve is this little device right here. It bolts onto the side of the throttle body with 3 small Phillips screws. It has a coolant in and outlet, which is used to heat the body of the IAC, that then varies the degree of movement that the piston moves, that bleeds the amount of air into the engine. To undo these screws that you occasionally, or you want to give yourself a tiny bit more room, by undoing this bracket and undoing the 2 10mm screws, just to allow me to shift this bracket back a little bit. And see, that just gives you that tiny bit of extra room. I'm going to use a pair of pliers, and I'm going to squeeze this hose clamp to loosen it, and then we're going to just twist the hose back and forth, and you're going to see some coolant come out, and that's normal. See, and then you're going to do the same for this bottom clamp. Squeezing it, taking it off. Just gonna pull that off, and that exposes the IAC valve. Now to remove the IAC valve, you're gonna use a Phillips number 2 on a socket. I cannot overemphasize the importance of using a good quality Phillips number 2 socket bit. These screws are a nuisance to take out, and they can strip extremely easily. So you'll notice here, right, that my bit fits perfectly in the screw, but it doesn't go very deep because these screws don't allow for that. So it's important that you insert this bit perfectly straight the entire time while you're undoing it, and then you're going to apply some constant pressure while you're pushing this way against the screw so that it doesn't allow the bit head to walk out of the screw head. Press firmly and squarely into the screw, and you're even going to give it a tap to undo them. Once they've been loosened, go on to the next one. Break them loose, and then finish the last one. Same procedure. So there's 1, 2, and just give the IAC whack with the ratchet to break it off the throttle body. So this is what my IAC valve looks like after it's been removed from the vehicle. As you can see, the outside actually looks really clean and there's nothing broken on it. But what is really obvious is that it's extremely dirty on the inside, right, which is a result of blow-by and just carbon and high mileage on the vehicle. That has likely seized the piston that moves inside here. So this is like an electric actuator motor. There's a wax pellet on the end here, and there's a piston that basically acts as a mini throttle body inside this valve that allows air to pass from this top passage, or this top passage, to this lower passage, and the throttle plate on the throttle body sort of sits in between this. So when the IAC works, it's actually the equivalent of you stepping on the gas pedal to allow more air to pass through to bump up the idle speed. And the reason why there's a coolant passage on the IAC valve is that there's a little wax pellet inside on the end here that expands and contracts based on coolant temperature that will limit the amount that the solenoid will open and bleed the amount of air across. So as it gets warmer, this wax pellet expands, which then actually closes off the amount of air, or reduces the amount of air that passes from this end to this end of the valve. So here is my old IAC valve, and here is one from the wreckers. Now my old one here actually has a lot of crap in it jammed up, and that's probably why the piston's seized up. If I bet you if I clean this one up, it'd be okay, but the junkyard one's in better shape, so we're going to flush it all out using throttle cleaner and just douse the piston and just rinse and repeat several more times. Using a towel, we're just going to clean up our little IAC motor here, wipe off any excess dirt. Is that I will give this a thorough cleaning as well since I'm in here. So we remove the old IAC valve that the O-ring didn't come out with it. So I'm just going to take a little gasket pick here. And I'm just going to pull that out. So we're going to install a new gasket. It's Honda part number 16456-PLE-J01. It's just that little gasket there. I'm going to install this. I'm going to fit this O-ring into the grooves of the throttle body, making sure it's pressed in evenly and not misaligned. Take our replacement IAC valve along with a screw and carefully place it over that gasket, making sure it doesn't move. Just going to snug up this top screw so the gasket can't come out, and then proceed to install the remaining screws. We're going to take our ratchet and just snug these screws down. Not even tighten, just snug. I'm barely applying any pressure because there doesn't need to be a lot. You don't want to over tighten because you'll snap the bolt or strip the threads, which will mean that future replacements or any work on the throttle body will become very difficult. Reinstall our little support bracket, 2 10mm bolts. Again, just hand snug is good. Reattach our 3P connector, making sure that's plugged in. Lower coolant hose. Reattach the clamp. Do the same for the top. Make sure the clamps are oriented in a way that it doesn't rub against any other component. And next we can remove the air cleaner ring. Now before we reinstall this ring into the air filter box, you need to pay attention to the back side of this ring here. So it came off the throttle body like this. So this horn piece is actually inside the air box, and then this is actually slips over the throttle body. That if you look, there's this little rubber nubs. You see that? And then inside the groove channel here, there are indentations as well that correspond to the pattern on the end of the air box. So you're just going to have to install this ring with the flange port going in, because that belongs in the air box, and then lining up these little bumps right there, if you guys can see them, and the grooves to the little cutouts as well as the little plastic peaks on the box. Okay, so this is what the ring looks like reinstalled. You'll notice that it sits perfectly flush with the housing. There's no weird bumps sticking up. And a rule of thumb, because I did notice that the pattern of alignment was very specific, that you see that cutout in this ring, it actually lines up perfectly with the opening here where there looks like to be an internal wall inside the air cleaner box. So the next step is to reinstall the lower air filter housing on the motor. But before doing so, we got to make sure that we don't forget to reinstall the lower air filter housing throttle body clamp, and making sure that you orient the clamp in the proper direction so that you can actually tighten it once you put it back onto the throttle body. Okay, so this is what the air box looks like before we reinstall it. And notice that the clamp, that bolt there, is facing to the right, and that's the proper orientation we want to put it in. Now to install this, we're going to install the air box by putting it in at an angle and then dropping it down over the throttle body. With a little bit of wrestling and wiggling it back and forth, I was able to get the valve cover breather hose back on, and the throttle body is fully seated into the sealing ring because there's no gap here between the air cleaner and the throttle body. So we can go ahead and reinstall our screws. Don't forget to tighten that clamp, you know, behind the air box there. Just finger tight is good. And then reconnect our electrical connectors. Now with the repairs completed on our vehicle and our scan tool still connected, let's put the vehicle back into run by turning the ignition on, linking our tool, and then erasing the codes, confirm, shut the ignition off, disconnect our scan tool. Let's go ahead and start the car. Oh, look. The engine is now idling at 1400 RPM, which is what it's supposed to do. So as you guys can see from my video, the replacing the IAC valve on your 7th generation Honda Civic, or any Honda for that matter, doesn't take a lot of effort, and if you use some used auto wrecker parts, that it actually almost costs you nothing to repair. If you guys like this video, give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel, and thanks for watching.